Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our short video interview about the German novelist W.J. Sebald. My name is Melanie Blake, and I'm the Director of Classical Pursuits. And I'm here today with one of our longtime leaders, Wendy O'Brien. She's going to be talking to you about Sebald and his work. She'll be leading a seminar that starts on February 17th that features two of his novels, The Rings of Saturn and Austerlitz. And you, like me, may be wondering, who is W.J. Sebald? W.G. Sebald. Tell us, Wendy.
Thanks, Melanie, for your question. And hello, everybody. And yeah, W.G. Sebald is an author that I was really surprised. He shows up, at least two of his books, the two that we're talking about in this upcoming seminar, show up on everybody's best novels of the 20th century list. And those two novels, at least those two, also show up on the best novels ever list. You know, like those lists you get on The Guardian or New Yorker.
I love those lists.
I know, so do I. I mean, we use them a lot, don't we?
Yeah.
But it's so funny because he shows up over and over again, and people do what you just did, like, who the heck is Sebald? So Sebald was a German writer. He wrote only 4 complete prose books, and I'm going to use that word prose books very specifically, and maybe we'll come back to talk about why in a minute. He wrote these 4 books, and he died in 2004, so we don't really know what more he would have written. And I think there's a couple of reasons people don't know him really well. Number one is this small amount of literature or full books that we have. We have a lot of essays. We have a lot of talks with him that folks in my seminar I'll be sending links to, so that we have a chance to get to hear him a little bit and get the cadence of his language. I think also it's because people didn't know what to do with him. So he shows up on these best novel lists, but people have like a lot of questions about, is it a novel? The great psychoanalyst / literary critic Adam Phillips sort of started this debate and said, is it a novel that he's writing? Are these 4 novels, or are these 4 history texts? Others have said, are these 4 novels, or are they 4 photography books? And I think that's part of why people don't know him. It's like, what kind of thing is this? I know it sounds like a strange question, Melanie, but his books really do get us to think about what kind of thing are we holding as we look through them and find that there's photographs in them, snippets of poems, travel log, bits of memoirs, pieces of biographies, not just his, of other people's biographies, as well as, you know, gorgeous, beautiful narrative prose kind of passages that he writes. And so I think it's partly because people just didn't know what to do with him. You know, what is he doing with the novel form? And I have to say that I know probably watching today are some folks who are with me right now. We're doing Proust. We're doing In Search of Lost Time. And the reason I mention it is that it's kind of interesting reading these two together, because I think Proust also was messing with the form at the beginning of the 20th century. And here we have Sebald, very much, I think, in conversation with Proust, messing with the form, like, what is a novel? What do we include? What don't we include? How do we write it? What is, I think, ultimately the purpose of a novel that both of them are facing? So I think it has something to do with the form. I think it has something to do with the small oeuvre that we have of his. I think it has something to do with the fact that, you know, much better known in Europe than he is in North America. And all that, despite the fact that the late, great Susan Sontag, she was once asked, you know, is there any more literary greatness? You know, has literature, has fiction kind of reached the end? And she said, the person that gave her hope that literary genius would continue and that the form would evolve was Sebald, of all people. So if you haven't read him, it is a bit of a maze to enter into his world, but I think it's one that is so worthwhile undertaking, and his works really should come back. And I have to say, there's a little bit of a renaissance happening because we have the first biography translated into English just this past year. which also made it to the lots of people's, kind of top biographies for last year, but a great biography, which gives us kind of new interest and insight into his work.
Oh, cool. We'll have to put the link up for that on the
For
seminar
sure.
page as well. And that's the beauty, Wendy, you mentioned this maze, and that's the beauty of the seminars, right? You're going into the maze with other people, and those of you who have been with Wendy before know she's covered a lot of contemporary European fiction, including seminars on Elizabeth Bowen, Kazuo Ishiguro, Ian McEwan, Pat Barker. I think of the various novels you've read and in those seminars, and some more experimental than others, and some definitely their own kind of maze.
Mhm.
And reading it with a group and hearing the ideas of others always always enriches the experience greatly, I think.
Yeah, and especially with Sebald. So Sebald knew that he was experimenting with the form. Like, he always put it up front. It wasn't like, I'm going to surprise you. He was always aware of it. And one of the things he said, and one of the quotes that really has guided me towards wanting to read this with other people, as you mentioned, is he said to aspiring young writers, he said, by all means, be experimental, but let the reader be part of the experiment. And as a result of that, I think there's just so much that we gain from reading with each other from it, in the sense that he is experimenting, and we kind of need lots of eyes to try to figure out what is he doing with us, and what's the nature of the experiment. So I think he would, oh, here's me being very pompous, I apologize. I think he would really approve of us reading collectively, reading together, to figure out what the experiment is, and to explore his work in this kind of way.
And do you think, Wendy, it sounds like, because I know he writes about 20th century Europe, is my understanding, and a century where so many things happened, and trying to absorb and reflect on all that. Do you think he was equally concerned about both things, kind of talking about Europe and what had happened in the 20th century, and also talking about the novel itself? Do you think both were like equal priorities for him?
I think so. You know what? His is really an encounter with history. Like, how do we write history? When we were getting ready for the seminar, Melanie, as we were getting ready to talk today, I was thinking, I always think about, oh, these are the reasons it's good for us to read these books, and then I always go, okay, like, Wendy, take that away. Why do you want to read them? Because probably that's a better introduction for folks to the novelists or that I'm looking at, and also to the style and the questions that I'll bring to the seminar. And I have to say, one of the things that really draws me to his work, especially after having read Proust and Bowen and Barker and Ishiguro, is they're all really trying to figure out, like, how do we write history? How do we capture on the page history? I have this great fascination with historical fiction, with not only its content, but with its style. And if you think about those writers, and for some of the people who are watching, they've been with me in one or many of those seminars, each one has a different kind of approach. Like, how do we write a history that in some ways was like no other? How do we write a history and not make it so watered down that we lose both the joys and the horror? And I think this is very much part of Sebald's project. Like, how do we write history? He's totally fascinated with this question. He another great quote from him. He said, "We all have appointments with the past." And he just brings us along to that appointment with him, to figure out, like, how do we write the past? How do we write a collective past? And how do we write an individual past? And to do that, and to not, as I said, to water down or to take away from some of the horrors in particular of the 20th century, he had to experiment with form very much, right? Like he couldn't just write, he couldn't write a straight narrative. You know, he couldn't write like Proust, because between Proust and he, we had 2 world wars. And we saw the world differently, and we thought the world differently. So he had to write differently. He had to think about these questions differently. And I think that that's the best way to get at his work, is that, you know, how do we write history, but also how do we think history? And I think for those who are approaching Sebald's work for the first time, and you pick up the book and you go, what kind of thing is this once again? What have I, AKA, what have I got myself into? You know, when you see the photographs and you see the snippets of different genres, I think he's trying to get us to think about thinking about the past. How do we keep that appointment with the past? How do we not make it less than what it is? So very much experimenting with and picking up that question that so many of the novelists and the philosophers that I'm interested in, you know, these confrontations with time and with memory and with the past. How do we do that? I have to say to that effect as well, another reason I really love him is it brings together 2 parts of my interest in how this gets cashed out. And that folks who've been in seminars with me will know. I do a series on visual art. And I've also done a bunch of novels, and people always go like, why? But it's 2 different ways to kind of look at the world, 2 different ways to think. And one of the great things about Sebald is he brings those 2 elements together for me. There's this amazing photographic kind of study that he has. And for him, photography was so important. He said at one point in time, it's the moment when the shadows of reality, so to speak, emerge out of nothing on the exposed page, as memories do in the middle of the night, darkening again if you try to cling to them. I was thinking about that passage a lot, because his photographs are like that, like what emerges from the photos that the words couldn't capture. And what do we get in the words that the photographs don't capture? And what do we get in poetry or in travelogue that we don't get in straight narrative? So I think those sorts of questions he's so involved in and so engaged in, and he puts it on the page. He brings us with him as he tries to think about, as he shows us his thoughts on how do we write history? How do we tell the story of the past?
Wow, it sounds like it's going to be a great seminar. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you for introducing him and his work to us. Again, everyone, this is Wendy O'Brien leading our seminar, W.G. Sebald, Writing the Past, starting February 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It's 6 weeks, 2 novels. And if you might be thinking to yourself, oh, I'm out. I can't read 2 novels by February 17th. Do not worry. This is read as you go. And Wendy will have a schedule breaking down what needs to be done each week. We approach it week by week. So there's still plenty of time to sign up. And thank you, Wendy. Anything else you wanted to add?
I did. I just wanted to mention that Sebald, because especially in North America, he's not nearly as well known as other places. Getting copies of his work is sometimes a bit of a challenge. I know on our website, we have editions that I've suggested. Just wanted to let folks know, please, any edition, I will be sending out information and questions, and where I will identify the sections, the passages, the images that we'll look at. So any edition that you can get your hands on for this reading, I'll be sure to provide you with enough information that you won't be lost at any given time. And one of the big questions we'll have to ask is, why aren't his works being published, especially in a time when history is so interesting to us? I was thinking, Melanie, about the rise of the publication and the selling of historical fiction, and yet here this great commentator and writer on history has fallen off. So please, any edition you can get is a good edition.
Great. No, thanks for pointing that out, Wendy. Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this interview, and we hope to see you on February 17th. Any questions, please feel free to contact Wendy or contact me, info@classicalpursuits.com, and I can pass it on to Wendy as well.
Thanks, Melanie.
Thanks, Wendy. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.